where it ended up, but I mean, it started cool. And then the and then like not that long after it started, Beard was like, "Hey, do you want to join our fun thing that you wanted to join?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And so that's where it all began.
You weren't. I had forgotten that you weren't in that initial character creation session for D&D BT.
No.
There was a faux warrior in there by the name of Brett, who wanted one of the highest interception score possible. I kid. So yeah, it was a really fun character creation session just because it was somebody completely new to role-playing games trying to figure it out and realizing it was not for them. So it was a relief that they realized that, and then that we were able to get you to come in, and because you were actually interested.
Yeah, I remember. Actually, I think I know where it started because we were coming back from heavy on wrestling, and we had been calling a show, and I think Beard had sort of brought it up, and I was like freedom of thought character creating while we were mostly mildly inebriated on the drive back from Duluth.
I remember this.
Right? So that I think is probably where it officially came to being. That was a really weird character creation too, because obviously the character evolved from the road trip version, but I didn't know anything about D&D at all, and so I was doing this like all solo. Just okay, I hope this is right. I hope this makes sense, and got started. And it turned out like 2 or 3 sessions in, I was like, I have not added my proficiency bonus to anything. I am way better now. Thanks D&D Beyond for doing the math.
So thinking about it, do you think that, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this. Do you think that, in your opinion, the idea informs how you build, or do you think the build informs the idea?
But the idea informs the build entirely. Kletos was a little bit different because I didn't know how to build a character, so I just put things places. I was like,
we hung you out to dry on that one a little bit.
I was like, I don't need wisdom. And then I was like, wait, monks need wisdom really badly.
Oops. Also, man, there's a lot of saving throws that are wisdom based that if you do not have them, it's curtains.
Hey, we got to a high enough level that it didn't matter because monks become proficient in all saving throws later.
It's true.
So
true.
Also, I roll like hot fire, so it
does not matter.
It does not matter. It is bananas. I'm just like, I wish I hadn't rolled that 17.
You know what it is? It's somehow you cosmically absorb all of Nate's good rolls, and they just come to you.
Yeah, I'm the karmic retribution / reward. Or I hadn't killed Nate before, so that was a new trip on Monday.
I didn't know about that. Wow.
Yeah, well, because I rolled the 17 for the dragon to throw the.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did know that.
Sorry, I shouldn't just say 117. You know the specific 17 roll.
I was like, what? Monday? Mm-hmm. Was there another game on Monday?
Okay, killed Nate.
Trying desperately to remember what I do.
But
yeah, you did.
But yeah, it's for sure. Idea shapes the build. Like, I think there's some. I try not to. I mean, I am not a min-maxer by any stretch of the imagination. No, I prefer to have my characters be flawed in at least several ways. But I've kind of learned over time that like dexterity is important. like So I'll usually have it at least in the mid range, if I don't have a reason to not, like.
So when you're looking back at even when you're playing like a bunch of one shots,
Mhm.
do you feel you can just jump in and make a character on the fly and go, or do you need time to prep and figure out what you're trying to build?
I would say generally I need time. If I were needed to do, I could do something on the fly, but if I did something on the fly, it would look a lot like an existing character that I have. I think, I think the way that I develop character ideas are almost like Worrier archetype characters, and so they sort of evolve over time. And it's like I need a sort of like you know creative inspiration, and that sort of lightning bolt, whatever you want to call it, the light bulb. We're in modern times. I sort of,
Are we?
kind of, I don't know anymore.
Yeah, to me it's debatable now.
Yeah, but I need some kind of like inspiration, a sort of like very foundational inspiration to come up with someone compelling. So a lot of times there's actually a lot of exchange with me between one shots and campaign characters. So like oftentimes characters I play in one shots that I've worked on a little bit, I'm like, oh, this character works. I like this character. I like where they're going. They'll evolve over time. So like Highland, my current character in Drakewind Falls, he began life. Highland 1.0 was a one-shot character. We ran the Thunderlock bar crawl at level 20, and so he was a monk. He was a drunken master monk, but I liked his vibe a lot. So now he's a sorcerer. But like a lot of times I'll get a vibe for a character, and then I'm like, I want to explore this character more. Same thing happened with Tiburon. Tiburon's on like version 4.0.
Yeah, I was going to say, you just keep kind of adding layers to that character.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like it's sometimes better if you don't have that immediate attachment in that immediate moment of, I'm trying to think of the kind of connection that having a character that you're basically workshopping in order to find a version that you feel like I would want to play this person long term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I think that it is a very valuable thing to do. I very much believe in like giving character. There's the sort of like kill your favorites or whatever, and I'm like, no, love your favorites, coddle them, help them grow. Like I really believe in that, because I think that sometimes, like, I think especially with like TTRPGs, like sometimes a character just doesn't get a fair shake. Maybe it was a one shot. Maybe it was a campaign that didn't fit the character as well as it could have, or just the vibe of the campaign was weird, or whatever, or it ended early, or anything like that. And I think it's valuable. It's for me to learn who that character is, and how that character might better fit into a world. Like Tiburon's a perfect example of that. Like first draft Tiburon was like, no one would like this person. No one would like this person. He's supposed to be a kind of like a socialite. Like he is a mover and the shaker. People have their material reasons for wanting to get on his good side, but people also like want to be him. And I'm like, no one would want to be this guy. He's an asshole. And so like, I think having that time to like vibe with a character and like get to know and like see how they grow and change is absolutely valuable. I recommend it.
Do you feel like you have an archetype you have a tendency to either build around or find yourself sometimes trying to make sure you don't fall into? I know, like, just for me,
Mm-hmm.
Nate in the chat, the only thing he had going for him at the start were his salted meats. It's very true.
Those salted meats
Very,
have made it through
very
several
true.
different multiverses, so they're pretty good.
I know for me, I had a long string across a lot of different games where
Mhm.
I seemed to play a very similar character as far as like
Mhm.
very archetypical. And it
Okay.
took a while to realize that and then to break out of that cycle and try something completely different and then find that,
Mhm.
oh, okay, well, now I can circumnavigate games a little bit differently. Do you find yourself, as Elvis would say, caught in a trap? Or do you feel like you've already kind of evolved to that next level of building characters?
I think that I am prone to fall into a trap, or at least there's like a character archetype that I like. I like a dumb Western, like dumb cowboy accents character.
You do a very good cowboy accent.
Thank you. Like a sort of somewhere between like if you just took Sam Elliott from like 1 intelligence to 20 intelligence, like somewhere on that spectrum. It's a very comfortable place for me to play, and I think it's been interesting because I have a number of characters who vaguely fall into that archetype, and seeing how like even that archetype grows and changes is super fun. And like there's a lot of variety within an archetype. That's why it's an archetype and not a niche, you know. So I enjoy that. Highland sort of has that accent, although he's not really that archetype. Kletos was sort of the beginning of that, and then Balder evolved out of that. And I have a Blades in the Dark character who is like grouchier Balder, and then a few others, and yeah, I think it is good to grow out of that, to like to play with things and find out what it's like. But I've probably got like 4 character archetypes I can slot into to varying degrees. I don't know that I can call Akko an archetype because he's just so weird.
No, I don't think you can. That's why I was intrigued to ask you that.
Yeah, he's so weird.
So different.
He's so weird, and it's just like he tells me he's driving. I'm I'm not. It's sort of that. I mean, one of the things I do when I play is like threads appear, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna grab that one, and things that I never would have expected when I was drawing the as yet unplayed character up, like come into focus, or I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that he's hyper competitive, or that he has a height complex, or that he has a like delusional level of confidence in the way that it's manifested. All those things, like that to me, that's the fun of playing.
Yeah, do you think that's the collaboration around the table of, like you said, those threads? I know that there's a definitely kind of a train of thought about threads, and in some ways, with DMs they'll call them knives. When your players hand you knives, don't be afraid to hand them back to the players blade first. So, I think is that do you think that's part of being in a group, part of that collaborative effort?
I think it is. I think a really good group is passing knives around. I think, I that's the kind of table I like to be at, and I want to be at, is a sort of openly collaborative, and like, not to overuse yes and, but that sort of like, everyone's game.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that when everyone's game. It's more fun than everyone's trying to get their shit in. Although there are moments for everyone's trying to get their shit in. It's called a PvP one shot. It's not that I'm not guilty of trying to get my shit in, but
well, I would ask you about this, and I will be as diplomatic as I can possibly be about it.
Okay.
do you think that, especially early on in your playing RPGs, that other very strong personalities can create a small cult of personality with at the table, and then get their shit into a degree it can really, really derail a game?
I mean, yes, that can happen. It did happen. But I think it happened in a slightly different way. I think that is true, and I think that's how it began. And actually, like along that vein, one of the stronger through threads of the entire campaign came out of sort of another player and I sort of getting our shit in a very kind of goofy way that then grew into a like in-game thing and manifested in a lot of different ways, and ultimately ended up like fully changing my character and writing a subclass for him and that kind of thing. I think what ended up being problematic more than personalities was it was a combination of someone trying to play a character in a way that they didn't have the balls to back it up. Like wouldn't go all that way, right? You know, so every time it was sort of this like, so it was just this like, it just got really toxic. And I think the flip side of that was so many of us being new to TTRPGs, and even our DM was new to DMing, and I think not having the tools to know how to address a toxic player, whether or not that player was intending to be toxic or otherwise, became a problem because it just never got better. And like, you know, and the answer I think was someone needs to leave, you know, or this campaign needs to draw to a close faster than it did, you know, whatever, you know, some combination of that. Because it wasn't like efforts weren't made, but I think they were not, it was kind of just weak sauce all around, I think, in, you know, the all shades of that, because, you know, it was like, I'm going to play a kind of evil character or a super evil character, but then I'm also like, I'm not really going to, I would like to not face consequences for that. And I will find in and out of game ways to avoid consequences.
I would,
you know?
I would point out that same archetype happened in our Domains of Dread game as well. And in that particular case, having more miles under my belt, I was like, oh, you want to be bad? Let's be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also put that character, that player, in a position where they were like, oh, I did all this real bad stuff. I don't know what to do now.
Right. It's like, uh-oh, I found out.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that is, you know, again, a sort of thing. And I liked how you managed that. And, you know, when that player kind of decided, I think I'm done here.
Which still, to this day, I am just like, what?
Well, I think though that it's kind of odd. I mean, you know, particularly in that case, there was a known end, you know, a known end date. But I think
even more so when it was like, okay, well, you can just have my character to do with what you want, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, how did this? What'd you think? And I've never heard a response. I literally have not. It's been radio silence. That was the last thing we exchanged. It was like me saying, "What'd you think of this?" Like, I'm intrigued to get your feedback on this, and I've never spoken to that person since.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they've never responded to anything after that.
Wow, so that's a bummer. I really liked what you did. I thought it worked out better that way in. From a story perspective, and you know, it's a fun thread into Down and Outlands.
It's the knife thing again. That player handed me a cutlery set almost every session.
Yeah,
And I will say at the end, everything good that came out of that, honestly, is because of the setup that player put into it. And I do feel it's one of the better endings I've ever, like definitive endings I've ever had in a game.
Yeah.
And it's all because of that player. And I wish that they understood that or even knew that, but it's not going to happen. So when you're looking at it, getting off bummers, do you have ends in sight? Like, do you say like this? I can see this character running this arc, and then they're done. Like this is the ending that I foresee for them.
I haven't fully gotten to a point where I've had that with a character. Baldur, I think, yes. I think Baldur. I like Baldur, and he's sort of a character I'd be interested in exploring a little bit differently. Sort of like a different campaign vibe, even.
Yeah.
But I think his story concluded where it needed to conclude. I think he was he was sort of a character who felt like he felt really wronged, and I think he was reluctant to fully acknowledge his complicity in the wrong that was done, and that was something that I was interested in playing with. And I think he got to a point where he's like, you can't change the past, but like, I earned this.
Yeah, I redeemed myself.
Like and I think him choosing to stay in the domains. I mean, that was very much him being like, no one can
resist Pepperidge Farms.
No one can. No one can.
No
I've heard about this since episode 5. Now that I'm here, I'm never leaving.
Oh God.
But I think that was like I think that was an important thing for him, was to have that sort of like to get to a point where like leaving this thing that he's been pushing for the whole campaign, to like just get the F out of here because this place sucks, to both learn enough about the place to see the bright spots, to see the good in the place, to see that like nothing is absolute, because Baldur was a character of absolutes. He was like, it's my way or the highway. He was like, this is what's good and this is what's bad, and if you don't like it, I don't want to talk to you. And so I think for him to, in a place that like I think is often painted in absolutes, for him to find the gray and to be like, you know what, like I did do a bad thing. This is where, whatever it is, where the universe put me. So
that was
I'm going to leave here. I'm going to earn it.
And that was one of the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron. I keep interrupting you.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I'm going to earn it. And by the time that campaign ended, he was like, I didn't earn this. He's like, this is cheating.
To a degree, I guess. One thing I will say about that I thought made him so compelling was the fact that he had a blind spot, and that blind spot was Magnar. He was like my way or the highway with everybody but Magnar, and it made it like interesting because Magnar was the person on that downward spiral that it just kept twisting. And also at the end, I kind of felt like you got a little bit of the Thanos ending, as far as like, did what I needed to do. Now I'm just farming and just living my life, just I did what I set out and did what I felt was necessary, regardless of the consequence. And now I get my peace, I guess.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think for me, like, that worked for him because he was a reluctant traveler. I wouldn't even call him an adventurer, but like he never wanted to leave his original home.
Yeah.
He liked it there, but stuff happened and he did. so I think that like he I like to me that made sense for him. I would be curious to like, you know, well, the Domains of Dread 5 years later, 10 years later, I think there's a point where he'll get bored, and I think, and where, in a place where there is no small amount of injustice, where there is no small amount of suffering, I guess is probably a better way to put it. He's not going to like abide by that either. So I think where he was left was in a comfortable respite before whatever he might whatever might find him down the line.
Do you think that your archetypes and what you put together changes based upon the system?
No, not so much in my experience. I think, I think I like that. I like the idea that like a good character is a good character, regardless. And I guess I'm more interested in like the who this person is than I am in their particular skill set, and that makes it easier. I created a character named Ferdinand Moody, Big Mood. He's also a Minotaur, and
you love yourself some Minotaurs. Is there a reason behind that?
Yeah, they don't get any play. They're like I have always liked the sort of Beastie Boys, like I like a I don't know, I don't want to play a person. I am a person. I don't want to play a person specifically. And I think when I was looking through, like, I generally kind of like Minotaurs as just a mythological thing, and I feel like they always get like a raw deal. It's like, who put them there? Like that, and like I think when you get to that, I know, especially I know it's a common discussion topic in TTRPGs is this sort of like, well, this race is evil or whatever, and I'm like, that's so boring and stupid. Like, there's no way that like every gnoll is evil. There's no way that like you're telling me there's no story in which this evil race, like, even if they're cursed or if they're or whatever, like, no one has been able to break a curse in a world where curse removal magic happens. And,
I think it boils down to moral social reductiveness, and I think that was far less an issue when the community was very small and insular. Once it expanded, people started to ask more of like, why are we doing things this way? What is the benefit? Doesn't it pigeonhole our stories? And I think that that's a big deal, that when people realize that, it put us in a position to tell more interesting stories, and to tell stories where you don't necessarily have to tell a redemption story. You don't necessarily have to tell the Dris der Uden, I am 1 in a million special person. Instead, you can tell the world I lived on, this was not the case. It's a omniverse. I can be whatever I want to be. I definitely enjoy that story far more. It feels more inviting to be imaginative.
No doubt. And I think it's actively harmful to play games where an entire race of beings are de facto evil, and you're like, I saw one, so I got to go kill it before it kills me or whatever. Like, there's a particularly in the past few years, like, that sort of mindset has been creeping back in a pretty strong way. Not that I think it ever left, but that it's become a lot more vocal and a lot more pervasive. And I think it's always good to be aware of the sort of larger sociological implications of what you're doing, because like, even if in a broad sense you're teaching yourself to think these people are evil. Like, even if it's not an analog to anything in the real world, like that's still a mindset that you're like fostering within yourself and with other players or whoever's watching you. And it's just less fun. It's just less fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm big on that theory of other. I especially when like John Carpenter will talk about it a lot of times, and I find that very interesting, that the scariest thing ends up being the other. Like, it's the tribe sitting around the fire and saying, you know, there's a thing out there that isn't like us, and what it is just another tribe saying the same thing because they just don't know each other.
Right.
So yeah, there is something like that inspires fear that way. But I think if you're looking at it across the spectrum of wanting to have something a little bit more, I guess adult would be the word I'd look for.
Sure.
I would say that, yeah, being able to look across and say, okay, well, you know, it's just another tribe of humanoids. Maybe their moral relativity might be completely different than yours. And rather than just say, let's annihilate them, you know, let's instead like try to figure out, is there some type of impasse we can come to?
Right. I think that's way more interesting too, right? Like, you know, and I think that like D&D is a war game, you know, at its core. It's a game where you go fight things and kill them and get prizes, like, you know, like sort of at its base. And so I think it's fun to explore alternate ways to at least try to like address things, you know. And what, you know, it's not like it's never interesting to me to look at like what something is. It's more interesting to me to look at like, well, what could this be? Like, what are the opportunities here? Where are the story beats in here? Where, you know, this seems curious. Let's follow that thread for a minute. And I don't know. To me, that's always way more interesting.
It's really, I will say, as a longtime player, and DM, it's really hard to untrain your mind, because you're constantly like, well, these are default bad guys. These are the guys that we can, that I need. If I need a bad guy, I just can slot them in, and we can get off and running.
Sure.
But I've tried really hard to change that thought process to the point I've tried to make someone like Moloch somewhat likable, because I really enjoyed Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford's explanation of that a devil would not be overtly evil towards you. There's no point to that. Their goal is to persuade you to like join them. So they would be very accommodating and friendly, because that would serve their purpose.
Yeah.
So when you look at other games, let's say beyond a medieval setting, beyond a fantasy setting, do you find you enjoy it as much, or do you find you're constantly going, "Oh man, I really miss this"?
There's a comfort and familiarity to D&D, and I think a lot of that is partly, I mean, it's what I've played the longest. It's also the most accessible. You know, I've watched a lot of D&D being played too. So there's like a familiarity there. But like, I don't know, other systems are fun too, because they can play up different aspects that lack a little bit in D&D. I played a couple times. I played a game called Genesis, which is made by Fantasy Flight Games. Makes it. They're based here in the Twin Cities, actually not too far from my house, weirdly. But the dice are different. It's not. I mean, they're polyhedral dice, but like they all have different faces and meanings, and you get successes and failures and critical failures, and there's a, I don't know how to DM it. Like, it is on one hand easy, but like the dice, you know, there, because depending on things you add bonuses or whatever, and how many success, it's a really cool dice system that I do not understand. But also the fun of it in a way is that I think more so than D&D, the GM sort of interprets what that means. So there are some hard and fast rules, like you have X more successes than you need, so that goes into this pool and you can have a different effects. You know, there's a few hard and fast things, but it also gets to kind of pick how that goes. And sort of like PBTA, there are sort of like partial failures and partial successes, which are fun. But it's very much a storytelling game. There is combat. You can combat if you want, but you don't have to. And it's sort of like, you know, sort of along the line of like GURPS. It's meant to be applied to anything. So like you can play in a fantasy setting, you could play in a modern city setting, you could play in Fresno, California, you could play, you know, like whatever you want to do.
Pasadena,
yeah. There are these kids who are stuck on a roller coaster. It's a weird thing, and so it's really fun. I've got a regular Blades in the Dark game that I play. Blades in the Dark, also fun.
Yeah.
Really simple, you know, kind of on the flip side of Genesis, the dice are insanely simple. You're like, I have one dot here, I can roll 1d6. If it's above, you know, the DM gets to tell me like, you know, like a 6 is a success and a 1 is a definite failure, and everything else in between, a little bit up for debate. I do play
success with consequences.
Yeah, I do play a very, very curmudgeonly drunk cowboy in that game. But yeah, they're fun. And I've found, at least in the games that I've played, that, you know, anything that I have along the lines of like archetype or vibes or character things, like they don't have to adjust because of the system. I think that you can be system agnostic with your character building. You just kind of have to know what you want to play, and you have to figure out how to make that work in that setting. So you might find that a character is different. So I mentioned Big Mood Ferdinand earlier. He's the character I created for Genesis, and he has also played D&D one shots. He's played he's an NPC in Drakewood Falls right now, and he's had a number of iterations. He was a character I created specifically to slot into one shot games. Like I was like, I want this character to be able to be anywhere and fit anywhere. So he has like kind of, there are broad strokes to his character background that can be very easily adapted and slotted into wherever he's playing. So if it's a one shot, like, okay, he's from one town over or whatever. And
sounds like he is very much an archetype then.
He is more than any character I have an archetype. Like he is absolutely just, yeah, slot him anywhere. I know who he is. He's based on as you might have guessed from it, he's based, like his whole like origin is basically Ferdinand the Bull, the story. Mm-hmm. You know, his family are all very accomplished adventurers. He has chosen not to do that. His family owned like an adventuring shop, right? And so he stayed behind. He runs the shop, and then his family, he just doesn't hear from his family anymore at some point, you know, and he doesn't know, like I know what happens to his family, but like he doesn't. So eventually he's kind of like, okay, well, I guess they're not coming back. So he changes the nature of the store. He uses all the old adventuring gear and turns it into topiaries, like, and he calls his store Pedal to the Metal because flowers. And he's you know, sort of like gentle giant character, huge, ridiculously large minotaur. Like yeah, he slots anywhere. and he's really fun to play, and everyone loves Ferdinand. So that's a bonus.
There's your show. Everyone loves Ferdinand.
Everyone loves Ferdinand. But yeah, so I think you can absolutely be system agnostic with your character. You just have to figure out how to put him into that world.
Is there a system or a setting that you either have played very limitedly or haven't played at all yet, where you're just chomping at the bit to give it a shot, to build? I mean, more or less, I shouldn't even say that, not just to play, but more so just to build a character, to invest a character in that type of setting or system.
I'm very interested in Spelljammer. I am very interested in it.
It's buck wild. It is.
I know.
Buck wild.
Like, it's D&D, but it's like crazy and also a little stupid. Like that's basically, that's me, buddy.
We've dipped our toes in it, but we have like the minimalist of toes.
Yes, yeah, and so I'm hoping that there's a book soon, but I don't know. There is. I'd love to play more Genesis. Actually, it's really fun. I think I am curious about Kids on Brooms / Kids on Bikes.
I think I have a PDF of that if you're interested.
Yeah. I think I'm interested in that. I think that sounds super fun. I liked the Dimension 20 Misfits and Magic series that they did. That was really, really good. Yeah, I think other things like there's nothing where I'm like I gotta get into that game. I think there are things where I'm like I would be curious. I'm curious about Monster of the Week. I'm curious about Glitter Hearts. I'm gonna play Crash Pandas soon, but like there's nothing out there that I'm like I gotta play this. I've picked up a few systems just to. There's one that seems interesting. I really need to like sit down with it and see if I can kind of wrap my head around it. It's called Dot Dungeon, and it's this very JRPG or / like no, actually sorry, not JRPG, that's Ryutama. It's like MMORPG.
Interesting.
And so you're kind of like in one space inhabiting you as like you are you, but then you're also inhabiting your avatar player character, and it seems really interesting. But like reading through it, it's like the rules seem very simple, but in that way I'm like I need more rules to understand what's happening here. I need to see people play it to kind of get a vibe for it, but it seems really interesting. I'm also very interested in Invisible Sun.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Invisible Sun is it's Monty Cook Games.
Yeah.
It is very it's very like it seems very moody, very emotional, very sort of just kind of a little fucked up. But like I know a few people who play it and really enjoy it, and I've watched some live plays of it, and it seems like a very intriguing and interesting and also extraordinarily daunting system. So
yeah, Monty Cook doesn't play like his systems and even settings are just massive. Is there a genre you'd like to explore as a player?
I would like to think more than a genre. I would like to play in a slightly more like I had to use the word serious, but like a more like dramatic game. I think
a more grounded game.
More grounded, a more emotional, a more like I think where the story is in how the players deal with things maybe is it's a hard thing to articulate. Just a more I think when they're like moments are given a little bit longer to breathe. You know, the story beats are a little bit more. They're a little heavier, but like I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to balance that because I feel like so many of those games end up being very trauma informed, or like
Yeah.
it feels like that, you know. And I don't necessarily want that. After Kletos and Baldur, I was like, I don't really want to do like traumatic background characters anymore. I was like, you know, I think, you know, and that was a big change of that was Echo actually, knowing coming in what the base of the story was going to be. I'm like, it's trauma enough for everyone. You know, I want him to have had like a very like happy like childhood up until he got abducted by space spiders. And you know,
in a way, I was kind of like, I kind of want Annie, but a little bit more messed up.
Sure. I mean, we're not that far from that. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what it looks like. Maybe I'll have to DM it. I don't know.
Well, I would say like Monster of the Week, Monster Hearts, those type of games definitely. Mm-hmm. Every time I have run those games, they end up being a lot darker, a lot moodier, a lot more, I mean, for lack of a better term, adult in nature.
Sure.
So they definitely are challenging for players. But I've been very lucky. I've had players who are just like at the time are all about it and tend to run buck wild with that material.
Yeah. Sure.
I find those games taxing to run.
Sure.
Because you have to be very cognizant, as you said, of being aware of, I don't want to trigger someone's trauma. I don't want to make a situation like that feel trite. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of high wire act.
Yeah, I almost think for me it's less content and more pacing.
Yeah,
I feel like D&D, there's rarely time to sort of marinate in what you've done.
I'm super guilty of that. I am the worst at that. I love to rush from crisis to crisis. So
sure. Well, and I think, you know, it can be a challenging thing because I think you have to like also gauge the interest in like skill set of the group and the vibe of the group, right? Like not everybody wants to do that, right? Like, so, you know, but I think like just a differently paced, and maybe, you know, maybe it's because I think D&D often runs like that. You sort of like do this thing that is world changing, or, you know, just like that was super fucked up. And then it's kind of like, and now you're back in town, you know, and I think like D&D across the board is often very like that. Even Critical Role to a degree.
I would say like there is a setting called Birthright.
Okay.
That was a second edition setting where you only went on one adventure a year.
Oh wow.
Because you all had higher up positions within society. Because basically it's like one of you is boy king. And it's a setting where like there's only one Gorgon, there's only one Medusa. These are like, there's just one. And every time you kill someone who has that birthright, you can absorb their power. So it has a little bit of Highlander to it.
Okay.
But you're dealing a lot with like running a country, basically. So there's a lot of intrigue involved. Like we played a game in college where myself and another player were playing brothers who were basically organized crime. And we were constantly going against another player who was the head of the church. We were starting rumors and we were stealing from them, and we were just causing problems because the church was kind of overbearing. And the player who was the king was like, My name's Paul. That's between y'all. Yeah, I
That's
got
a
other
good
problems.
tagline.
Yeah, I got other problems, so that are far more, of an actual issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting setting. It's very like, it kind of has like an Arthurian vibe to it,
Okay.
but it's different, and I think that's also a system I very much love, and I would love to maybe explore it at some point in a fifth
Sure.
edition style. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to find. I think masks would be another one that would be
Masks is fun.
interesting. Yeah, it'd be fun, but also like just the secret identity portion of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think is rife with good role playing storytelling opportunities.
Yeah, I'm curious about the balance in that because, as you know, from any time we roleplay together, I will bullshit for hours. Like I love it's so fun to just like riff off of people and that in character, not
Yeah.
that
No,
I've gotten
yeah,
much
you're
better
really good
about
at it.
out of character things being said. But the like and that's super fun to me. And so like I think finding that balance is super interesting to me. It's something I'm working on with Highland is to kind of like Highland will always grab an opportunity because he's designed as being relatable. He was like the big minotaur on campus. Like he's very chill and very likable. And so it's a fun thing for me to like think about and work on is like how are people likable? What makes people likable, and
Yeah.
so he's super open. He's super like, oh you gave me a little something, let me give you 3 times that back, kind of vibe. But I'm interested in that balance of like, how long is too long to kind of like luxuriate in a moment, and how long is, and what's too short, and I know that varies from situation to situation and table to table, but it is always kind of an interesting conundrum for me in TTRPGs.
I would say too, like just addressing some of the. I know as a someone who runs games, one of my weaknesses is that I will divide folks up into smaller groups. Yeah, and then I will jump back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great because it adds unearned tension.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is you've always got to be jumping to another crisis of some type, and sometimes they're completely manufactured, and that can be an issue.
I can see that. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but particularly looking at, I don't know, a certain group of kids, that it also, there's like what you thought would happen and what people do with it. And I feel like each split gives like, sort of exponentially increases the likelihood that like someone's going to decide not to go with their friend and instead chop a hole in their chest and become king of the realm or something, or whatever, or fight a dinosaur, or
That's my favorite part about running games is the unexpected
sure,
bullshit contest of the players going, oh yeah, and then they decide to do this thing that doesn't make any sense to me, and then I go, oh yeah, and we just kind of go back and forth exchanging beautiful one-upsmanship of insanity.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it helps that you have a character who will literally be like, oh yeah. Like,
well, I think, and I've made it abundantly clear that we're kind of headed towards a transition point in Down Outlands.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be interesting because what happens when there's not as many bad guys to fight or monsters to kill on a weekly basis?
Sure.
So how does that then work for a character like Akko, who is constantly looking for the next kind of land to plant a flag in to say, mine.
Echo, yeah, I don't know. I love Echo. He's so weird. He's just so
What
weird.
happens when Akko's challenge is less gouging out the eyes of something and instead being forced to take a class?
I'm curious to see what that will look like. I have my ideas for what it is. I think he will surprise people. But because like the way I think about Down and Outlands is like they have been running for 30 episodes now.
Yeah.
And you know, when he's not in fight or flight mode, Echo is a little bit different. And it'll be fun to explore. I wrote out a lot of stuff about Echo and like what his home life was like and kind of how he was and who he was. And I think if he's able to get back to a place where he feels that safe, it'll be interesting to see what he looks like.
Yeah, I'm very
I will
intrigued.
leave it there. No spoilers.
I'm very intrigued to see how this all plays out as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Warrior,
Yeah.
where can people find you?
You folks can find me at Worrier MN on the socials, Instagram, Twitter. Technically, I've got a Twitch channel. I just don't play it very often. But if you ever want to watch me silently play Destiny 2, like and subscribe. You can find me every other Monday, the next one being the 28th, I believe, on Down and Outlands, 7 p.m. here on Known World United. You can also find me on Drakewind Falls every other Saturday. Next one is the 2nd of April. I play a very chill Minotaur there and a very unchill Knoll on Down and Outlands. You can also... I don't think it's been announced yet, but keep an eye out. I will be somewhere also on April 2nd. So keep an eye on my socials.
Also, if you are interested in hearing Warrior commentate, there is places you can find that.
That does exist.
Where Heel Turn Radio did a lot of commentary work for local pro wrestling across the state of Minnesota. And Ryan, you were amazing at it, so I don't know why you were
it's less how we did and more where we did.
I would suggest go to Heavy on Wrestling. Don't worry about the other places that we
go to Heavy on Wrestling for. Even though I made my best joke on the other one.
But hey, we got to see some really wild stuff at Heavy On.
We called some bananas. We've called Sting, the NWO, Booker T,
Ultimo Dragon,
crazy Ultimo Dragon, like absolutely wild. The jazz, absolutely wild. God.
Papa Shango,
yeah, absolutely.
We called Matt Seidel Airwolf. That was also known as Darius Martin now in AEW.
Yeah, we called an AEW match 3 years.
Yeah,
before it happened.
That's friggin' wild.
Yeah. So yeah, Heavy on Wrestling. There's some good stuff there. It's fun. Lance Hoyt. What is he?
Yeah.
What is he? Who is he now?
Lance Archer.
Lance Archer. Ambulance match. Emma.
Yeah. Holy
Victoria.
Crap.
Yep.
A chain rope match.
Mm-hmm.
We call it for those in the area. It's calling Eric Cannon, Darren Corbin in a no holds barred match where it was just buck wild.
Mm-hmm.
Called a lot of Eric Cannon matches, which makes my heart grow through sizes.
Yeah, we did. We called a lot of Eric Cannon matches.
We've seen a lot of We've seen a lot of Dante. We've called a lot of Dante and Darius Martin matches. For those more in the death match scene, we did call some Orin Veidt matches.
Mm-hmm.
Some JDX matches. Who else has made it big? James Tapia.
Devon Monroe is
Devon Monroe. Yeah, he's tearing it up.
Yeah, all variety. Anybody, just about anybody from Minnesota, we've called
Yeah,
in,
we've been
and a
very
bunch of
lucky.
people who used to be in WCW.
Yeah.
So, uh, um, yeah. Anyway, yeah, Heavy on Wrestling. If you can find it, and good luck doing it, you can hear us call
Also,
those.
we called matches somewhere else, but I'm not going to tell you who it was for because I don't give them publicity.
No.
Even
Yeah.
though I think that was probably our best work.
Oh, it was absolutely our best work. We did much
Plus, we
better
called like
commentary for the other folks.
30 shows. So,
You're also booking it.
yeah, that's why it was good.
Right.
Yeah. Warrior, thank you as always.
Yeah.
Not just
Thanks,
thank you
it
for
was
coming
fun.
on, but thanks for being my friend, and thanks for coming in and playing D&D as well as other games. Thanks for your work on Extra Life. Yeah, thanks for being a part of our Heel Turn Wrestling family and being a part of the best 3-man commentary booth in the history of modern Minnesota wrestling. Setting
Prove
that
us
bar.
wrong. Show me the lie.
Yeah, setting
Show
that
me the
bar
lie.
really at a mediocre level, baby.
Okay.
All right, so this is Prep School. We'll be back in a week. I have no idea who the guest will be. Otherwise, you can catch me this Tuesday on the Heel Turn Radio channel for Tiny Ming at 8 p.m. Central. This Thursday for Bad at Games, I think we're going to stick with Death Trash since we had so much fun playing it. Although I'm constantly jonesing to go back to PZ. And we might be changing the format of Bad at Games and having 2 weeks a month where we play the same game. So I might have a PZ week, and then Beard and I are talking about going back to the bread and butter that is the Twitch Pro Joe Fire Pro Wrestling. 1 week a month as well. So on Thursday nights, they were. We were thinking about redrafting so we can get rid of even more problematic wrestling people.
It's the struggle of wrestling.
Yeah.
Perpetually, just like, oh no, you too.
So, okay. Yeah. Thank you, of course, to Nate Dogg, to Shaggy, to I'm not sure who Nightbot is.
Nightbot's our bot.
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
Well, hey, Nightbot. He was not
out there.
He was not spamming.
Nightbot hates caps.
Yeah, apparently. And to whoever else was watching, good luck rolling them 20s, baby. Bye.
Bye.